I hope that you're as excited as I am about our final session for today. Meeting this moment, how community organizations are mobilizing collaborative housing and energy solutions, a panel of 5 community-based organizations from across the country making very real impacts in the communities they serve. I'll turn it over to Alexis Washburn of Emerald Cities Collaborative, who will be the moderator for this panel, to introduce herself and the panelists. Welcome, Alexis.
Thank you so much, Stephanie, for that introduction. My name is Alexis Washburn. Oh, can everyone hear me okay? Thanks, I'm off mute, so if you can't hear me, just let me know. But my name is Alexis Washburn, and I'm the Northeast Regional Director at Emerald Cities Collaborative, and I'm really excited to kick off this panel where we get to hear directly from folks at community-based organizations who are actively involved in this work. And so next slide, Mandy, please. And so our goal for folks attending today is outlined on this slide. And we hope that by participating today, you'll walk away feeling empowered to apply lessons learned from the highlighted community-driven retrofit efforts to your own context, discuss types of systemic, structural, and historical oppression that cause the need for community-driven retrofit programs, identify a variety of approaches and methods for establishing and growing community-driven retrofit programs, as well as recognizing the challenges and best practices for community-driven programs and campaigns for residential retrofits in underserved and marginalized communities. And so next slide, please. So we're going to start off with a poll question to get a better sense of the audience. So I welcome you all to participate in this question while I briefly introduce our panelists. And so joining us today from the Community Development Corporation of Pembroke and Hopkins Park, we have Jahari Cole-Quelly and Lee Ringo. From Community Action Network, we have Derek Miller. And from Push Green, we have Lou DeJesus. From Power Interfaith, we have Amani Reed. And from Project Empower, we have Nkwanda Jah. And so from these brief introductions, I'll also dive in and let the panelists introduce themselves in more detail. But just to take a moment to sort of recognize the folks that are in this room. So the poll question was, which best describes your organization or work? And so it looks like we have a good percentage of people representing government. So this is a great opportunity to hear directly from community-based organizations on the projects that they're implementing. And we also have good representation also from community-based organizations that are already doing retrofit work and those that are interested in doing retrofit work. So hopefully there's some lessons to be learned here. I'm really excited to share more. And so I'm going to transition next to our panelists to let them introduce themselves in more detail. And so each panelist will have 5 minutes to introduce themselves and talk about their work. And just to make sure that we have enough time for a Q&A at the end, I'll give you guys a little notice when you're close to your 5 minutes. But while you introduce yourself, please address these 3 points: who you are, where you're doing your work, and who your community is, and examples of your projects and approach. So including how you began and your approach to working on upgrades in homes, buildings in your community. And so I will transition over first to the Community Development Corporation of Pembroke and Hopkins Park.
Hi, everyone. My name is Jahari Cole-Quelly, and I am the current president and the managing director of the Community Development Corporation of Pembroke and Hopkins Park, which we affectionately call the CDC. And we're an organization, a nonprofit organization of community volunteers that formed nearly since 2018, that we formed into a charitable organization, but we've been working together as volunteers, as a task force, handling different situations and issues that came up in our community that we wanted to address and that we felt passionate about, and we wanted to do something about it. So we became basically a community action group and back in 2014, 2015, and we really worked well together and decided to continue as a charitable organization since. Since then, we've had a lot of success with developing youth programs, as well as working with conservation groups in our community We have an area that is ecologically rich and very rare of its kind, and so it's globally significant. And so we work with a lot of conservation groups in our community. Our community is historically an African American community of about 150 years. We're going on a, excuse me, 150-year anniversary coming up very soon. And we have been very, we've been very successful in terms of traditional legacies and trying to maintain our legacies. And this is one of the things our community organization focused on. When we were approached by several folks in clean energy work who heard our plea over 10, 15 years ago for clean energy solutions and to address our energy burdens that we have. We're currently about 80% of our constituents in our community are on propane, between propane gas as well as wood burning stoves and electric. So between those three, makes up the main energy dependency that our community deals with. Recently, our community has been rewarded a natural gas pipeline in our community. And it spurred of some controversy. It spurred some, some question marks and some cheers. So we've had a mixed bag of how it was perceived and received in our community. As a matter of fact, the groundbreaking is coming up in another week. But the community recently, within even this year, this past year, had a poll where majority of the people in our community, a resounding 60–70% of them said they wanted clean energy solutions. Fortunately, before we even knew the breadth of the sentiment in our community, our organization was approached by our partners with Midwest Building Decarbonization Coalition, as well as RMI and Fresh Energy, to assist us with developing a clean energy solution. So we've been fortunate to work with some very excellent partners at developing this plan of action to give our community a choice. Is the primary goal of ours, is to give our community a choice, a clean energy choice, and to address a lot of the energy issues going on. One of the things we found, and my cohort and partner, Lee Ringo, will address that very shortly, was a lot of because due to a lot of redlining, traditional, malpractices, I call them, against communities of color, we've had to deal with a lot of things like neglect, redlining in our community, where a lot of the homes suffered and are in debilitated conditions because many of our residents were not able to afford to redo their roofs or do typical maintenance and updates on our homes. So this posed a lot of issues that we found and that Lee is going to be addressing a little bit later. But our community program, our PEEP, which we call it the Pembroke Energy Efficiency Pilot, we're really proud that we've completed our construction. We worked with several residents, completed construction phases. And as you see in this picture, one of our residents are very, very happy. So we're going to, I'm going to turn it over to Lee for him to continue to speak on some of those, the things that we found in our community. But we've had a successful program, and now we're moving into phase PEEP 2.0. And that's what we're planning on now. Thank you.
Hey everyone, good afternoon. My name is Lee Ringo. I'm the current Energy Efficiency Program Manager, working closely with the thriving Community Development Corporation of Pembroke and Hopkins Park. I started this off as a project manager for the PEEP program. I had transitioned from operations to project management. And I seen the opportunity to work in Pembroke, where my mother grew up, and some, in a community that I'm very close to. So beginning of May 2021, I connected with the CDC, and they gave me the rundown of what they were looking to do, which was to introduce a clean energy movement in rural America. This is a community, some of you may already know, history of disenfranchisement, underserved, just a lot going on. And then, like as Jahari pointed out, the gas line. So it's been a great project. Like Jahari mentioned, we just wrapped up construction. It's been a long time coming. We did 4 homes in this project, in this pilot. Sorry. And now we're looking to expand it because what we did was we found a successful way to do this. And I'm looking forward to sharing those experiences and also learning more myself here. So definitely glad to be here and looking forward to share some insight that I have.
Thank you so much, Jahari and Lou. It's great to hear from you. I'm going to pass it over now to Derek from Community Action Network.
Thank you, everybody. So Derek Miller, Executive Director at Community Action Network. So CAN, we're based in Washtenaw County in Michigan. We have 7 community centers sprinkled throughout the area, and we are primarily serving under-resourced neighborhoods as well. And it's a mixture of the types of communities that we work with. So for example, 3 of the locations are affordable housing subsidized communities. One is a cooperative. Another one is a naturally occurring under-resourced unsubsidized community. And we're also working with a school community located in a rural area as well. And so in the city of Ann Arbor, they actually launched an A20 initiative roughly about 3 years ago. And I had CAN get signed up immediately, and largely because I'm always recognizing that under-resourced families are underrepresented when it comes to things that affect climate change and solutions and things like that. And so I wanted to really bring that to the forefront. And so fast forwarding over the years and a lot of kind of that coalition building with the city of Ann Arbor, specifically the Office of Sustainability and Innovations, we decided to try to decarbonize a neighborhood. And one of CAN's communities, the Bryant neighborhood, which is roughly 262 single ranch style homes located in the south area of Ann Arbor. It was originally developed in the early 70s, actually with some HUD funding intended to be a kind of starter home kind of community as well. It's roughly about a little over 50% BIPOC community, and a mixture of about 50% homeowned versus 50% renters. And we wanted that complexity in our project because the city of Ann Arbor has a broader goal of the city itself being carbon neutral by 2030. And we have to start somewhere. And so fast forwarding in this particular type of project, myself and eventually landed some seed funding from the McKnight Foundation to be able to start doing some pretty intensive work with the community and starting to really get a better understanding of not only the different types of health and comfort needs, but what is it truly going to take to fully decarbonize this particular community. And so through that process, we were able to hire some staff, fortunately also residents from within the community. And we were able to really get a full understanding of the needs of the community, but also what it will take to fully have it decarbonized. So for example, we worked with a local solar company that did a complete assessment of the community to know not only what is the full solar potential, but also even in the context. So just as a quick anecdote, in Michigan, there is a law that prevents residential and commercial properties from producing more power than what they consume. And so, which is really detrimental in terms of households that could truly be overproducing in terms of clean energy, but are not allowed to do so. And so we have the city found a way essentially around that by establishing what's called a sustainable energy utility, which is currently still looking at being able to establish that. And it would be able to circumvent that. And so when we did that full solar assessment through the community, we ran with that assumption that we did not have that limitation. And there was a whole ranking process too, in terms of high potential to low potential, what the production would look like, even down to the level of detail of what the arrays, arrangement, costs, and output and things of that nature. And so for every little area of this particular project, we've been documenting what it would take to fully have it decarbonized, because it also is a community powered by natural gas for its stoves typically and ovens, but also for its water heaters and furnaces. And so we have landed some initial funds to start to not only do the appliance retrofitting for further rectification for energy-based or electrical-based type of appliances, but also doing a lot of things that improve the health and comfort of the community. It is also documented as a pretty low air quality. It is right next to the expressway as well, and it has a lot of other particular types of health challenges, including a drainage issue, a historical drainage issue that is we have documented through our organization, causing some abnormally high respiratory illness rates within this community. So it really just hits all of the kind of core areas of what it takes to or of a community that really could benefit from some strong willpower from the private and public sector to help decarbonize it altogether.
Thank you so much, Derek, and thank you for seeing my time check. It's really hard, I think, to introduce all the great work that these organizations are doing in 5 minutes. So I'm excited for the Q&A portion where we can have more of a discussion. And so now I'm going to push it over to Lou DeJesus from Push Green.
Thank you so much. And thank you for having us, Push Green, take part in this event. 523 people here, that is awesome. So Push Green began as kind of an outshoot of the activism and organizing work done by Push Buffalo, which is People United for Sustainable Housing, based in Western New York. The offices are in Buffalo, New York on the west side. And so Push Buffalo started by becoming involved in affordable housing, but really remaining like acutely aware that that was not going to be all that was needed to solve the problem of energy equity in the area. Buffalo in particular is well known for being one of the top either 3 or 4 segregated cities in the country at this point. So Push Buffalo began campaigns, in particular the National Fuel Gas Campaign, which worked very hard with many other groups to have National Fuel and other corporations that were engaged in I'm sorry, I'm getting very distracted by the chat. Interesting chat. Corporations that were involved in using fossil fuels, which are detrimental to communities in terms of not only affordability, but in terms of the climate. And out of that organizing work, the Green Jobs, Green New York Act was passed, and this was in October of 2009. So what this act did was enable New Yorkers across the state to receive reduced or no-cost energy audits residentially. There were investments in energy efficiency work for LMI New Yorkers. At one point, even no-cost energy audits for small businesses and nonprofits. So a lot of wonderful things came out of that act. And one of those was Push Green, which is kind of Push Buffalo's little sister. And what we do at this stage in this iteration of Push Green is we work across 5 counties in Western New York to do energy outreach and education, primarily in LMI communities, help New Yorkers access those no-cost energy audits residentially, and then help New Yorkers learn about opportunities for energy efficiency retrofits. We also are very big still in engaging in other ways to protect New Yorkers, such as tenants' rights, housing justice, and seeing that as being all a part of creating strong, sustainable communities across Western New York. Again, my name is Lou De Jesus, and I am a community energy advisor with Push Green. I've worked with them for about 9 years now, and had the pleasure of starting in Push Green's second year as a program assistant and helping to develop a lot of the systems that are still in place now. I think it's safe to announce at this point that we're also going to be involved in a really, really exciting new approach that New York State is taking towards energy efficiency, which will be regional energy hubs. So we haven't had a soft launch yet. Stay tuned, take down our email so you can join us in celebrating that. But what we're hoping to do is really kind of concentrate our effort on the most important aspects of green energy for typically oppressed communities. Workforce development, I would say, is one in particular, and then educating folks in the opportunities for clean energy. And I see I have my warning sign, so I'll stop right there. And thank you again so much.
Thank you so much, Lou, for sharing. We're going to transition now over to Power Interfaith and hear from Amani Reed.
Thank you, Alexis. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Amani Reed. I use she, her pronouns. I'm 26 years old and I'm a Temple University alumni living in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. I got involved in this climate and environmental justice work because I was concerned about the injustices that I was seeing in my community, like dirty water, pollution, and housing. And I wanted to make a change for now and for the future. I believe that we need community participation in creating solutions, and we need to have a voice from the front lines up. I'm currently a climate justice organizer for Power Interfaith. We're a locally rooted organizing force fighting for racial and economic justice on a livable planet, and we value the common spiritual energy that underlies our humanity. We lift up the inherent dignity of every person, and we're rooted in shared faith and ethics, uniting diverse congregations and ethical organizations across the state. We want to live in a world where all of us, no matter what color, are in balance with each other and our shared earth. And I joined organizers and partners last year across the state to include housing, energy advocates, organizations, Pennsylvania residents, and state legislators for the successful win of $125 million to create the Whole Home Repairs Program for Pennsylvania. This was passed late July and was introduced by Pennsylvania State Senator Nikhil Saval. You'll see a picture on the screen of one of our campaign launches where we were educating and, kind of building that power and support around the whole home repairs. This program establishes a one-stop shop for home repairs and weatherization while building out our local workforce and adding new family-sustaining jobs in a growing field. And this program is the first in its kind in the nation. So we're looking for Pennsylvania residents all across the state to stay warm, safe, and dry in homes they can afford and getting the repairs that they need. This program works by doing three things. It provides up to $50,000 to repair, update, and adapt homes throughout Pennsylvania. It funds support staff to help people across the state with the assistance they need. And it also offers funding and training programs, along with stipends for trainees to build up the local workforce in our state and meet that demand. The Whole Home Repairs meets the real needs of our constituents. It's a direct investment into our people and our homes. And this was a long-term victory because we had to start by electing a climate justice champion, then sitting at the table with him to co-track the plan for safe housing, green jobs, and affordable energy. Then Power and our partners organized across the state to push for getting that funding, $125 million, into the state budget for the Whole Home Repairs. And we're so excited to win these resources for low, moderate income, and disproportionately impacted communities in our state. These victories are deeply rooted, long haul projects, and now we need to sustain and fund and expand the program, which we're currently doing. We worked with Senator Saval's office yesterday even for a call-in day to our new governor, Josh Shapiro. This week was his first week in office, and we did support by calling in and thanking him for his previous support of the Whole Home Repairs. And we also want him to include this into his year's budget and into this year's budget negotiations for the state. And he actually has a budget address on March 7th. So we called in this week and actually called the governor's office and thanked them. We also called members across the state and urged them to call the office as well. And another really great campaign we're working on and I'm leading is the People's Energy Campaign. It focuses on clean energy and renewable energy for homes. And for me, I've been really worried about the increasing energy bills and electric and gas bills that our community is seeing and many people cannot afford. And I want to see elected officials in our state put our communities first, put our health and safety first, and use profits for our community and not for fossil fuel industries. Right now, PECO is Pennsylvania's largest electric utility company, and they deliver power to 1.7 million of our consumers and more than 545,000 natural gas customers in southeastern Pennsylvania. It's regulated by the Pennsylvania Public Utility Commission, and they are currently prioritizing fossil fuel industries. We want the Public Utility Commission to listen to the community stories and their needs, meet our demands, and invest in environmental solutions. So right now, we're creating a grassroots People's Energy Plan or a green energy plan. And we're drawing on the experiences of Power's diverse membership all across the state to create a vision for this electrical service that is clean and something that we collectively need for our state. And I'm excited to talk to you guys more about that. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Imani. And then now to our last but not least panelist, we'll switch over to Nkwanda Jah from Project Empower. If you're speaking in Nkwanda, we can't hear you yet. You'll have to come off mute.
Okay, sorry.
We can hear you.
Thank you. And so glad to be a part of this wonderful panel. My name is Nkwanda Jah. I am in Gainesville, Florida. That's North Florida, and we're inland. I am the chair. I'm the executive director of Cultural Arts Coalition, where I've been doing environmental education with teens for over 30 years. I also chair the Environmental and Climate Justice Committee of the NAACP. I've been doing that about 5 years now, and we have done community forums at least once a year. In the fall of 2021, we sponsored, along with other organizations, a forum about moving towards 100% clean energy. At that forum, it was across the county, so there was representation from residents, from farmers, from elected officials, from the staff of our municipalities. There were environmental organizations that were represented, and it was a really good event. And one thing that the top thing that came out of it was that if we wanted to move towards 100% energy, clean energy, there were some things we needed to do before we could get there. Out of that group, we were informed about a grant opportunity for technical assistance from the Department of Energy. We applied, we put together a team from community organizations and Alachua County administrators, as well as the City of Gainesville administrators, and submitted that grant. We were one of 24 organizations across the country who received the technical assistance grant, and we were the only organization in the state of Florida that received that grant, and it was for our project empowerment, which is, it's a mouthful, energy modernization for people, opportunities, work, equity, and renewables. We started working together to talk about weatherization, because if we were continuing to lose energy in these homes, and the homes that we were really identifying in our grant were three neighborhoods that were traditionally African American. They were underserved in terms of resources, and some of them were fifth fourth and fifth generation of being in there, and their utility bills were unusually high. There were burdens to people who were on fixed incomes. So our organizations came together, and the first thing that we are working on, like I said, is the weatherization. One of the organizations that is a partner in Project Empower is Community Weatherization Coalition, but which I also serve as a board member on their organization. And our organization actually goes out into the community and conducts energy surveys, and that helps people understand how they can lower their utility bills. Once we weatherize homes, then we're able to go in and talk about solar and electrification and other opportunities that helps not just the environment, but income challenged people in our communities.
Thank you so much, Nkwanda. And so we're going to move now to our second poll. And so our question here for the audience is, what are your biggest challenges and what do you anticipate being your biggest challenges? And so it's hard because you can't select more than one here. But of course, if folks select other, if you don't feel that an answer represents your biggest challenge here, feel free to add that in the chat and to contribute a part of the discussion in that way. And then while we go through these questions, I'll also hand it over to our panelists maybe to talk about some of their challenges. And so when we see sort of the results come in here, maybe addressing some of the top challenges that people are facing, and maybe you can speak from your own experience, sort of how your organization has maybe overcome those challenges and how you're continuing to evolve or grow your work in spite of those challenges. And so we'll give it another minute or so. And it's so tough because you guys are all doing such fantastic work. So to answer it in 5 minutes is really hard. So it looks like one of the biggest challenges that folks in the audience are facing is the availability of sufficient long-term funding and also accessing enough funding. It's really hard to do that, I think, especially with orgs with limited capacity. And then sort of just going down in terms of biggest challenges, also navigating program rules, creating new partnerships, generating stakeholder buy-in. And we had so many sort of options here. But some of the other challenges that folks are facing also just included not enough local contractor capacity or readiness to work with new technologies. And then the issue of pre-weatherization work or other barriers before the weatherization work can happen. And so maybe we'll start off sort of in order of how we introduce ourselves, but also feel free for other panelists to jump in. But maybe I'll pass it to Lee, maybe to answer that sort of first challenge, maybe around the availability of sufficient long-term program funding and just accessing enough funding for a program.
Yeah, thank you. So these are all great points here. And that is the biggest challenge. It is accessing that funding. It's crazy. It's funny because when we initially started the program, we had the supply, but we didn't have the demand or buy-in from the community. But throughout the project and the success of the project, we got the buy-in, but now we don't have the supply. So supply, which is funding. So just being, I believe that there's a huge disconnection between who's allocating the money and getting it to these specific communities where the funding is needed. So figuring out ways to continue to work with our partners to apply for these grants and win these grants is something that we're looking forward to do. But I mean the idea is to create a pipeline of funding so when these projects are done, we're ready to hit the next project, because we started with 4 homes in our first project. and we're looking to do 2025 for the next project. And we can't do that obviously without the funding, for that. So setting that pipeline, for funding, has been a challenge, but we're highly confident with the partners that we're working with, and the technical assistance that we have to overcome those challenges.
And if I can interject, and just to add to what Lee was saying, when we first initiated the program, we had our budget set and we thought was adequate. And it turned out we were nearly double the amount that we first initiated with, because due to a lot of, once you peel back the layers and you see that there was a lot of issues with the homes that, even though we thought we worked with a great company, we did audits, original audits, we did blower tests. And once we actually selected the homes and did the blower tests on them, we found that there was a lot more issues with the homes that required from general maintenance, general repairs. So that we had to address a lot of those issues before we can get into the retrofit issues, or the retrofitting.
Yeah, I want to open up the floor to any of our other panelists, how maybe you're addressing some of these challenges that people are facing in your work.
Actually, I just want to piggyback off of what was just being shared. Not necessarily help, but it's one of those things that actually you should be aware of in trying to do this work, which is that, at least in our case, we really had to get the data in order to apply for the funding to start making things happen. And what that does is it creates some tricky situations where, so for example, we were also doing those audits, which we made sure to always call them energy assessments, like language matters with our folks. And like the moment they hear audit, and it's just like, absolute, like, nope. And so there were some very real challenges that came out of that. In one case, when we had these energy assessments done, turned out that the stove was leaking gas in this household with an elderly woman on a fixed income, and doesn't have the means to replace that. And we didn't have the funds, really, at least the dedicated funds to replace that. And so we are now in this kind of moral dilemma. What do you do? We ended up just biting the bullet and fixing it because it was completely unsafe for that family member. But if we do this on scale, that's going to be impossible for us to sustain that as well. And similarly, there was some very real kind of honest feedback from some of our folks. In one case, the household, the resident was like, "Why do I need an energy assessment when I see that there's a hole in my ceiling?" It's like, yeah, totally get it. Like, this is all just going to pull up bad news that you can't do anything about. But we really leaned into our relationships with these communities, and that's just the way our organization works. We're literally, like, our community centers are in these neighborhoods. We build these long-term relationships with them. It's like, yes, right now we don't have the funding, but we're doing this so that we can get the funding to be able to make these things happen. And so just, believe in the work that we're doing and lean into that relationship. And fast forward, and we, just a couple of months ago, landed a $500,000 grant to start doing these retrofits on 20 households of the 262 in the neighborhood. And that's just the start, but, making it work.
I wanted to say also that we call ours the tune-ups. Also, not audits, but tune-ups. I think the funding is always the problem, especially for community based organizations. But I find that we need to make sure that the communities that are hardest hit are at the table when we're talking about doing anything in those communities. There's a lot of if we don't do that, then they get information that's not quite true. The gas conversation now to me is like really big to move off of that. Bringing the health aspect of it, I think is going to really help people to understand why we need to move to clean energy. So having a community to be at the table, I think is very important in all of our work.
Thank you, Nkwanda. I want to transition to another question that I think sort of builds off a lot of what's happening in the chat. And then also this discussion between our panelists around sort of language and how important that matters. So I'm curious for the panelists, if you could talk maybe a little bit about how you educated your community about energy efficiency and environmental justice. And I know, Lou, you had your hand up maybe to respond to another question, but if you want to respond to this question, that'd be great.
Absolutely. And I think for Push Green, it's kind of a dialectic. These questions are all related and they inform each other and how you decide to answer. And I would say that having come from a base of community activism has also enabled us to do the energy outreach and education in a way that really connects with people. We can kind of tell the story and say, you know, Push Buffalo, one of the slogans, which is very, very much true, is we know what we need where we live. And so knowing that need, that guided our activism. It certainly gained community buy-in, and that buy-in helped us to put pressure upon the folks that do the funding to give us the funding. And it also helps to dispel the myth. It happens all the time. I'll show up somewhere to do a presentation, a workshop about energy efficiency, and people say, you don't get anything for free. There's got to be a catch. And I can remind them it's not free. We worked for it. And the same corporations making millions of dollars to pollute your community are helping to pay to fix it. So it's not free. You earned it, we earned it. So always keeping that in mind has really been helpful in just every approach that we have. Our kind of, I think of it as a pièce de résistance, is a program called Warm and Dry. And to speak to kind of what Derek is saying, everybody's saying, we were doing the energy efficiency work and found people saying, I would love to, but my roof is bad. So we just started taking a list of names, and the list grew and grew and grew and grew. And we could take that list to foundations, other funders, and say, don't try and tell us there's not a need. Here it is. And so we were able to braid different sources of funding, including the energy efficiency work. We were able to inform what the program looks like, so we could address a lot of issues of requirements that just really made no sense. If someone comes to you needing help with efficiency and they can't because of a roof, the roof is what has had them cited by the city, so they've lost their insurance. So it doesn't make sense to require them to have homeowners insurance to take part in the program. So I think definitely using that lens of community activism has been one of the most successful methodologies that we could possibly have used, and directing our days that way in every aspect of the work that we do.
Lou, I think you make a really great point. I feel like a lot of programs are designed where it's like, you know, we have this problem, we want to address it. And it's great to get benefits, you know, into the community. But I'm wondering, maybe you or others could talk about just addressing this question that was in the chat earlier, but how you engage low and moderate income communities on sort of actual ownership of these projects, and realize that, you know, especially when they have other priorities or they're operating in survival mode, how can they not just necessarily receive benefits, but also like really be active participants in programs and work like this? Maybe we could hear from Amani or others that we haven't heard from yet.
Yeah, absolutely. Just to kind of add to what Luana said, I think it can even answer this question. Many of the challenges we're facing, to find those solutions, we need to have a community-based solution, community-driven solution, and community voices are the voices that truly matter. And I think when thinking about power interfaith, we look at those stories, those real life stories, and in these low and income and disproportionately impacted communities, and those that have faced those burdens and faced those issues. Those stories and voices are what we feel need to be heard the most. And getting those voices to the right people, like our elected officials, like our governor, is where we believe true change can happen. Many times, you know, our elected officials, just speaking for Pennsylvania, they want to really know what's going on, and the only way they can do that is by hearing it from us. So, you know, community-driven and community-based solutions is what we prioritize, and that comes along with the work of organizations and collaborative efforts where we can have the same type of information that is like readable and, you know, one that people can understand and relate to and interconnect to, because, you know, these housing issues are real life issues. These utility bills are things that these are the things that people are worried about, and getting food on the table for their families. So getting the education out throughout different organizations and community groups even, we feel is, you know, the direct approach, where in turn we can bring those individuals into the conversation, so that they can feel a part of the conversation and part of the solution. Because at the end of the day, we're trying, you know, the solutions are to help us as a whole.
If I can add to that really briefly, one way we overcame this is, so when you go to these communities, you don't necessarily, and this is where we messed up at, you don't go to each home first, like, hey, here's this and here's this. They don't trust you, they don't know you. What really helped us is, you know, going to community members who actually have a strong presence in their community, having a conversation with them. This could be other organizations who have some sort of the same initiative, or just members of the community that, you know, are popular or just have that presence to get the community to help buy in. And go to them and explain, you know, what you're looking to do, and kind of, you know, collaborate with them, because the community knows them and community trusts them. So, you know, and leveraging that relationship to get this information out has helped us a lot.
Thank you, Lee. Any other panelists want to comment on how to build community buy-in and leadership as well as power through this work? Oh, Johari, you're on mute. We can't hear you.
Sorry about that. It also helps, as Lee was saying, to, you know, to employ, you know, people within the community that are, or, you know, have a tie to the community, and employ them and engage them in the process. Education is the biggest thing that we've found. Educating our community as a whole, you know, whether it was virtually, in our case, where we're rural, we couldn't do as many virtuals because we also have a broadband issue. So broadband is at a premium in our community. It's a luxury item. Excuse me, it's not the standard. So we've had that. So we've been engaging in, you know, actually in person. We just had one, you know, a recent record turnout for in person just in December. And, you know, and so these workshops that we're providing in that education to our community, and you get to see them one-on-one, and that builds up the trust, but also you get to hear their voices. They're not as quick to fill out a survey, more so they are to talk in person after they, you know, got to see what the program is all about.
Yeah, do any others want to touch on maybe how they engage in workforce development efforts in their programs or in their community to support some of the retrofit work?
I'll add in that it always helps to have partners and to find partners that maybe are able to complement where your own organization might not have its true strength at. So in CAN's case, we partner with Elevate, but also the City of Ann Arbor's Office of Sustainability and Innovations. And just like everything in this work, so much of it is about relationship building and really kind of towing the line with these different partners. What in our case, about 2 years ago, started off as like this crazy idea of like trying to decarbonize a neighborhood and not even having done that work before, but also realizing that, to my knowledge, in terms of established communities, that hasn't happened anywhere in the US. And so, but we not only had faith in it, but we also had the willpower to bring in enough partners and chip away at it. And eventually got the University of Michigan involved as well. And then now we're at the point where it feels unstoppable for what we're going to be able to do.
I agree that familiarity and partnering, the community being a part of it is very important. We went in with this project as the NAACP, so that everybody in that community knew about the NAACP and had worked or partnered with the NAACP at some point. After we introduced ourselves as the NAACP, then we sought out the leadership in that community by attending their monthly community meetings and building relationships with that community. And now as we move forward in our planning, those members of the community are a part of the planning. It's very, very important that you build those relationships in going in. They're the ones that take root, and you're able to grow from that.
Thank you, Nkwanda. I wanted to touch on one question that I think some of you sort of addressed in your introductions as well, but maybe we could talk a little bit in more detail about it. But I'm curious to know, how does the marginalization of your community play a role in the housing disparities that you see?
If I could speak for Pennsylvania, housing is one of our, top issues. And speaking even from where I live in Philadelphia, I used to work for a state rep in Pennsylvania, and one of the top things I saw, like as a legislative assistant, was housing issues, and many of those things were home repairs due to things like weather, or just homes being extremely old and just not having those upgrades that they need. So I think, it's very apparent that there's inequalities and inequities that we see, especially in different areas. Like Strawberry Mansion, for example, is a predominantly African-American area in Philadelphia. And as a whole, Philadelphia, there's many African Americans that reside in those neighborhoods that they reside in are those facing many of these housing disparities. They often have homes that are even uninhabitable. And when you go 5-10 miles down, you can be in a completely different neighborhood. So there's a lot to address there, but we want to really focus on those that need those home issues immediately. There is this home repairs program is an amazing step. It's $125 million for our state, but we know that we need much more than that. So I think addressing the funding that we need to, handle these issues is a large conversation, is the whole of the conversation. We have to continue to fight for funding and make sure that, as we said already, the funding is going in the right places. But, as far as those disproportionate impacts in those low income communities, you can see it just by driving around the city. It's very apparent. And, it's not something that cannot be looked at. It's not something that can be ignored. And, we have to continue to fight for the funding, which can get us the jobs and the assistance and the housing that we need.
If I can chime in our rural community of Pembroke Township, we just got a zip code within the last 15 years, 12 to 15 years. Before that, and even though we are one of the largest townships in the entire state of Illinois, and even at that time, we were nearing 3,000 people. We're down because of since the pandemic. I know we're around 2,500 now. But you're talking about a community that was severely marginalized for decades. And I mentioned redlining. They just lifted the redlining ban when we got a zip code. So many of the homes in our community were do-it-yourselfers. So there's a lot of that we see in our community, and just homes that just have degraded because of just not being able to properly address the issues. And so that's what we're dealing with in our community, and the marginalization.
So I'm curious to know, for folks that are able to, when you're actually able to make these projects happen in homes and communities and hopefully benefit tenants as well, has anyone successfully here worked with landlords or renters and also maintained affordability after improvements are made?
In Gainesville, we were able to get our commissioners to make rentals a part eligible for weatherization and other programs. We went through a lot to get that, to get the rentals included. And there is a provision in there that doesn't allow the landlords to go up on their rent for a certain amount of time. And yeah. So we've dealt with that. I wanted to say also that gentrification has played a major role in dislocating people who are financially challenged because they were not able to keep a lot of the homes up. Then though the codes enforcement and these other agencies of the city, allowed gentrification to happen. And we're hoping by doing our project that we'll get ahead of the ball a little bit by going into those homes and helping those people who are not financially able to do that now, but to help them so that they'll be able to keep their homes. They won't take out our neighborhoods that are over 100 years old, 6 and 7 generations. We can kind of head that off.
I would have to agree. That's been very, very important to us. Housing stock is ancient. Homes were built at times where there was no concept of, insulation. Hazardous materials might have been used. So in our in-house programs, we require landlords to not raise rent, based upon, well, I did these improvements, so now. And then also in the warm and dry program, which helps homeowners. Homeowners are required to stay in the home 10 years to kind of live out the lien on the home. But then if, say, a mother, which has happened, a mother wants to move to Florida, she's had enough of the Buffalo winters, and sells the home to a family member who is also low to moderate income, then they can kind of pick up the lien and keep going. So the whole goal of that program is to keep LMI homeowners in their community. So when the phone call comes from the real estate broker that's like signed up for a list and I'd love to buy your home, that they can say, no, thanks, I'm fine, not interested. So that's definitely a priority in fighting gentrification. And then also keeping things affordable for renters. If they can't pay a gas bill that's the same as their rent, then, they're more liable to get squeezed out of our community. So very, very important.
Thank you, Lou, for sharing. I want to sort of go back to earlier, one of our poll questions, figuring out sort of who was in the audience. And I think there's a lot of folks that are representing government. So, local, state, and probably federal government here. And this is a unique opportunity here directly from CBOs. And I think a lot of you have identified some challenges, and we recognize that you can't do this work alone. There needs to be support there from government as well. And so I'm wondering if some of you could talk about the role of local, state, and federal government to make this work easier and more impactful.
Yeah, just thinking, just to touch again on the whole home repairs program, that was a collaborative effort with Senator Nikhil Saval, who introduced it. However, there was support from state legislators across the state on both sides, Democratic and Republican. It was something that, I'm very new, like maybe three to 4 years into this work, but from people I was able to talk to with my experience in seeing the whole home repairs being passed, this is something that had not been done before, where he had received so much of that electoral support. And with that support, we were able to have those legislators educate their constituents and community around the whole home repairs. So I think that's another just example of that, like, community driven effort, where at the end of the day, like, we want to get this information to the community because they're the ones that are going to receive the funding and assistance that they rightfully deserve. So as far as elected officials, we're looking at them heavily. We want them involved in the work we do, supporting the work we do, and being able to advocate that when they're able to speak and talk to their colleagues even, for example.
Outside of funding, which is obviously like probably number one, I think what's also important from local governance is access. If we had access to specific data, that would definitely help with these programs, because it kind of is a proactive approach where they can give us information, or or homeowners who actually apply for certain weatherization or any type of assistance in this area. So that helps when we look at outreach and when we're marketing, selling these programs to the community. So obviously accountability on their end, but also, giving access to certain information definitely will be helpful.
And I think that, reaching out and working with the local officials, whether it's your immediate mayors and supervisors, as well as your, state representatives and senators, it only makes good sense, because at the end of the day, we're improving their community. We're their communities. Making improvements that betters the quality of life for their residents. And they're supposed to be representing, these are their constituencies that, that hire and elect them to do just that, to keep them safe, to keep them, increase their quality of life. And so that's what we're doing on the grounds level with our community organizations. We're doing that work. So it only makes sense that we collaborate with them. So in a partnership to make it happen.
And we can't assume that our elected officials understand what the situation is. We have to educate them also. It's very important that we do that, because they are led a lot of time by their staff, and their staff, it may not feel like it is to their best interest to give them certain information, or to give them the information, but not in a way that it is truly beneficial to our community. We've had to really pay close attention because our utility company hasn't been willing to go as far as the community wants it to go. But they're the ones that are talking to the elected officials, and our environmental groups do the best we can to get to them to explain what's really going on. I mean, they use words like, the staff, we're moving towards cleaner energy. No, that's not what we said. We said we want to move towards clean energy, 100% clean energy. So the staff is allowed to promote gas rebates. So we're trying to stop that and make sure that our elected officials, all of them, understand that there's a difference between clean energy and cleaner energy.
Thank you, Kwanda. I think that's a really great note to end on. And so I want to say, or rather express my sincerest thanks to our panelists today for sharing their stories and their experience. I think it's incredibly valuable. And I hope folks today walk away feeling sort of energized to do this work and begin tackling similar projects in their own communities. And it's great to see the chat so lively and folks making connections. And so I know some of the panelists have put their contact information in the chat, and then also on the slides we have links to each of their websites, and so you can learn more about their work directly. But I want to just give you all a round of applause and thank you so much for joining today.